The forgotten guardians, the crystal towers of Serenity Prime, reached toward the stars like frozen prayers. For over 10,000 years, these magnificent structures had housed the greatest treasure in the galaxy, the complete knowledge and history of every civilized species that had ever existed. The Villani, with their tall, graceful forms and luminescent blue skin, moved between the towers like living poetry, their forearms working tirelessly to preserve and catalog the wisdom of the cosmos. Elder Cathara stood at the pinnacle of the Great Archive, her ancient eyes surveying the peaceful valleys below. Her people had chosen this path long ago, becoming the galaxy's librarians, historians, and keepers of memory. They were warriors of knowledge, not violence. Their world held no strategic value, no rare minerals, no military significance. They possessed only information, stories, and the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 dead civilizations. The first warning came from the outer sensor stations. Communications keeper Zedris burst into the council chamber, her normally composed demeanor shattered by fear. The readings showed something impossible, a vast mechanical fleet approaching from the dark space between galaxies. The ships were unlike anything in their extensive databases. They moved with purpose and terrible intelligence. Elder Cathara, Zedris said, her voice trembling, the deep space monitors have detected an armada, over 5,000 vessels of unknown origin. Their trajectory leads directly to our system. She paused, her throat constricting with dread. But Elder, there's something else. Every world they've passed through, the populations don't just die, they forget. Their entire histories, cultures, languages, everything that makes them who they are simply vanishes. Cathara felt ice form in her hearts. The Devourers. She had read whispered legends of such beings in the most ancient texts, stories so old that most species considered them myth, machines that fed not on matter or energy, but on information itself. They consumed knowledge, memory, identity, leaving behind empty shells that remembered nothing of their former selves. Within hours, the analysis was complete. The mechanical fleet would reach Serenity Prime in 6 days. 5,000 ships, each one larger than the greatest Villani city, crewed by artificial intelligences that viewed organic memory as fuel for their expansion. Against this force, the Villani had no weapons, no shields, no military of any kind. They were scholars, not soldiers. Send emergency transmissions to all known civilizations, Cathara ordered. Explain our situation. Ask for help. Surely someone will understand what we're protecting here. The messages went out across the galaxy, carried by quantum entanglement communicators to every major power, every species that had ever benefited from Villani knowledge. The Altherian Empire responded. First, these golden-skinned beings ruled over 200 star systems and possessed the largest military fleet in the galaxy. Kithra waited with hope as their message decoded on the main screen. The Altherian High Command has reviewed your request. While we sympathize with your situation, current military commitments prevent us from dispatching forces to your sector. We recommend immediate evacuation. The rejection hit like a physical blow. The Altherians had used Villani archives to locate habitable worlds for their expansion. Villani historians had helped them understand the cultures they conquered. Yet when knowledge itself was threatened, they turned away. More responses came throughout the day, each one another dagger to the heart. The Silicon Confederacy claimed their ships were needed to protect their trade routes. The Ethereal Collective stated that the greater good required them to preserve their forces for more strategic objectives. The Aquatic Federation simply ignored the message entirely. Young Keeper Milex, barely past her century of learning, spoke what everyone was thinking. They've all used our knowledge. Every species, every civilization. When they needed to understand ancient technologies, they came to us. When they wanted to learn from the mistakes of fallen empires, they studied in our libraries. When their children needed education about the galaxy's history, we provided teachers. Her voice rose with righteous anger. Now that we need them, they all have excuses. 3 days passed with the same result. Smaller civilizations wanted to help but lacked the military strength. Larger powers had the strength but lacked the will. Some offered to evacuate a few thousand Volani, but with a population of 50 million, such gestures were meaningless. The knowledge contained in their archives represented the combined wisdom of 3,000 species across galactic history. If it was lost, entire civilizations would be forgotten forever, as if they had never existed at all. As the fourth day dawned, panic began spreading through the crystal cities. Volani families gathered in the great libraries, reading their favorite stories one last time. Children asked their parents to explain why the friendly aliens wouldn't help them. Parents struggled to answer without destroying their offspring's faith in the basic goodness of the universe. The evacuation ships that various governments had promised began arriving, small vessels that could barely hold a few hundred passengers each. The sight of them only emphasized the hopelessness of the situation. 50 million Volani, and transport for less than 50,000. Families faced impossible choices about who would live and who would stay behind to face the devourers. Kythera walked through the great archive one final time, her hands trailing over crystalline storage units that contained the complete records of species that had been extinct for millennia. Here were the songs of the melodic ones, whose homeworld had been consumed by its dying star 5,000 years ago. There were the mathematical theorems of the geometric masters, whose perfect cities had crumbled to dust in wars forgotten by everyone except the Volani. These memories would die with them, and the galaxy would be poorer for it. The fifth day brought the final responses. Every major power, every minor kingdom, every trade federation and military alliance had now officially declined to help. The Volani were alone, abandoned by every species they had served faithfully for 10,000 years. The approaching devourer fleet was now close enough to see with optical telescopes, a dark stain spreading across the stars. On the morning of the sixth day, Kythera prepared to address her people for the last time. The devourers would arrive, within hours. The evacuation ships could only save a tiny fraction of their population. The vast majority would remain to face extinction, not just of their bodies, but of their very identities and memories. It was a death more complete than any physical destruction. As she stood before the communication array, preparing to tell her people to face their end with dignity, Keeper Zedris suddenly straightened at her console. "Elder," she called out, excitement breaking through her despair. "I'm receiving a transmission, unknown origin, but it's definitely a response to our distress call." The view screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike any in their extensive databases. The creature had only 2 arms instead of the usual 4 or 6 found in most species. Its skin was a strange pinkish-brown color, and its eyes were small and forward-facing. When it spoke, the voice was firm and steady, carrying an undertone of absolute determination. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the human exploration vessel Pioneer's Dream. We received your distress call. Our ship isn't designed for combat and we're just explorers, not soldiers. But we've studied your archives through the Galactic Database Network. You've preserved knowledge that would otherwise be lost forever. That matters." The creature paused, its small eyes hardening with resolve. "We're 12 hours away at maximum speed. We know we can't win against those odds, but we won't let you face this alone. Humanity stands with the Volani." Silence filled the control center. A species nobody had ever heard of, commanding a single ship, was coming to help when the galaxy's greatest powers had refused. Kythera's legs nearly gave out from the emotional shock. After days of rejection and abandonment, someone had answered their call. "Who are these humans?" Keeper Milix whispered. Zedris quickly accessed the galactic database but found only limited information. They're a young species from the Outer Rim, carbon-based, short-lived by our standards. They've only had space travel for about 200 years. Their ship registers as a deep space exploration vessel, minimal armament, crew of about 300. 300 beings coming to defend 50 million against an enemy that had consumed entire sectors. It should have been laughable, but instead, Kythera felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Not hope for victory, but hope that they wouldn't die forgotten and abandoned. As the Pioneer's Dream raced through hyperspace towards Serenity Prime, the Devourer fleet entered the outer system. The mechanical vessels began their approach, sensors already reaching out to taste the vast stores of knowledge awaiting them. In a few hours, they would begin the process of consuming everything the Villani had spent millennia collecting and preserving. But now they wouldn't feast alone. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a small human ship pushed its engines beyond safety limits, rushing toward a battle they couldn't win, for people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy was about to discover what humans meant when they said, "We will defend." When humanity stands alone, the Pioneer's dream dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Serenity Prime system, and Captain Elena Rodriguez felt her heart sink at what the sensors revealed. The Devourer fleet was even more massive than the Villani transmissions had indicated. Thousands of geometric ships, each one a perfect fusion of technology and hunger, moved in flawless formation toward the crystal towers of the Villani homeworld. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander James Park from the tactical station, "I'm reading over 6,000 hostile vessels. The smallest ones are twice our size. The largest—" He paused, checking his readings again. "The largest is bigger than Luna Station back home." Rodriguez nodded grimly. The Pioneer's dream was an exploration ship, built for discovery and scientific research, not warfare. Their weapons consisted of mining lasers designed to crack asteroids and a handful of defensive systems meant to deal with space debris and minor threats. Against the mechanical armada approaching Serenity Prime, they were laughably outgunned. Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from her analysis of the Devourer ships. "Elena, I've been studying their energy signatures. These things don't just destroy civilizations, they absorb their knowledge directly from living minds. Every person they encounter becomes a source of information, then an empty shell. It's like they're farming intelligence itself." The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission from the planet's surface. Elder Cathara's image appeared on the main screen, her luminescent blue features marked by exhaustion and desperate hope. "Captain Rodriguez, we are eternally grateful that you've come, but surely you can see the impossibility of what you face. Your single ship cannot stand against such a force." Rodriguez studied the tactical display one more time, then looked back at the Villani elder. "You're right. We can't win a straight fight. But humans have never been particularly good at following conventional rules anyway." She turned to her crew. "All hands, this is the captain. In 3 hours, we're going to do something that nobody will ever believe. We're going to save a civilization." The plan that Rodriguez outlined to her crew was insane, brilliant, and typically human, in its complete disregard for accepted tactical doctrine. The Devourers were a hive mind, operating through shared consciousness across their entire fleet. Their strength came from perfect coordination and unified purpose, but that same strength was also their weakness. Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson, a gruff veteran with 40 years in space, summed up the strategy in his characteristically blunt manner. "So we're going to fly straight into the middle of their fleet, overload our reactor, and hope the electromagnetic pulse scrambles their network long enough for the Villani to escape? That's the basic idea," Rodriguez confirmed. "Except we're not just buying time for an evacuation. We're going to give the Villani something much more valuable than that." The Pioneer's dream approached the Devourer fleet with all systems screaming warnings. The mechanical ships immediately detected the human vessel and began adjusting their formation to intercept. Their alien intelligence categorized the small ship as a minor threat, worthy of attention but not alarm. They had consumed thousands of species across the galaxy. What could one more possibly do? As they drew closer, Rodriguez opened a channel to Serenity Prime. "Elder Cathara, we need your people to do exactly what we discussed. The moment you see our ship's reactor overload, activate every communication array on your planet. Broadcast everything in your archives on all frequencies simultaneously." Cathara's expression showed confusion. "Captain, that would take enormous amounts of energy. Our power grids weren't designed for such an operation. And even if we could manage it, what purpose would it serve?" "Trust me," Rodriguez replied simply. "Your people have been guardians of knowledge for 10,000 years. Today you're going to become its greatest weapon." The Devourers moved to surround the human ship, thousands of mechanical predators closing in on what they saw as easy prey. Their sensors probed the Pioneer's dream, analyzing its technology, cataloging its crew's knowledge, preparing to add both ship and mines to their vast collection. They failed to notice the modifications Chief Thompson had made to the reactor core, or the way every system on the ship had been reconfigured for maximum energy output. When the trap was finally sprung, it happened faster than any organic mind could follow. Rodriguez triggered the reactor overload while simultaneously activating every transmitter on the ship. The Pioneer's dream became a brief star in the darkness, its death scream creating an electromagnetic pulse that spread through the Devourer fleet like wildfire through dry grass. The mechanical hive mind, accustomed to perfect unity, suddenly found itself fragmented. Individual ships lost contact with the collective, their shared consciousness shattered into thousands of confused fragments. In that moment of chaos, the Villani activated their plan. Every crystal tower on Serenity Prime blazed with light as the planet's entire energy grid channeled power into the communication arrays. The archives that had been quietly collecting knowledge for millennia suddenly began broadcasting it all at once. The complete history of 3,000 civilizations flooded space on every frequency the Villani could access. The effect on the Devourers was catastrophic. Their mechanical minds, designed to process information in orderly streams, were suddenly overwhelmed by the greatest data flood in galactic history. Stories, songs, scientific theories, philosophical debates, mathematical proofs, artistic expressions, and the accumulated wisdom of ages crashed over them like a tsunami of pure knowledge. Ships that had operated with perfect efficiency for eons began spinning wildly through space, their navigation systems overloaded. The largest vessels, with the most sophisticated processing capabilities, suffered complete system failures as their artificial brains tried desperately to categorize and consume the impossible volume of information being forced into their consciousness. From the surface of Serenity Prime, the Villani watched in amazement as the unstoppable mechanical fleet tore itself apart. Devourer ships collided with each other, their coordination completely destroyed. Others simply shut down entirely, their processors locked in endless loops, trying to sort through the knowledge barrage. The few ships that managed to maintain some functionality began retreating immediately, fleeing from what their logic systems identified as the most dangerous information hazard they had ever encountered. In the aftermath of the battle, as the last Devourer ships limped away into hyperspace, rescue vessels finally began arriving in the Serenity Prime system. The Altherian Empire's golden warships appeared first, followed by the mighty dreadnoughts of the Silicon Confederacy. Fleet after fleet of the galaxy's greatest powers materialized from hyperspace, their crews prepared for a glorious battle against the mechanical threat. Instead, they found debris fields where the Devourer fleet had been, a single human escape, pod broadcasting a distress signal, and 50 million Villani very much alive on their crystal world below. The arriving fleets had come expecting to find a dead system. What they discovered instead was a miracle that would reshape their understanding of warfare, courage, and the true meaning of alliance. Admiral Thexus of the Altherian fleet was the first to demand an explanation. His golden features showed confusion and barely concealed embarrassment as he spoke with Elder Kithara. "We detected massive energy signatures from this system. Our sensors indicated a major battle. Yet we find you unharmed and the Devourer fleet destroyed. How is this possible?" Kithara gestured toward the small human escape pod that contained the survivors from the Pioneer's dream. Only 63 humans had made it to the pods before their ship's reactor overloaded. Captain Rodriguez and her remaining crew floated in space, their vessel sacrificed to save a world they had never seen before that day. "Admiral," Kithara said, her voice carrying a weight that made the powerful military commander step back. "These humans did what all of your fleets could not. They didn't just fight the Devourers. They understood them. While you saw only a military threat, they saw an intelligence that could be defeated through intelligence itself." The story spread across the galaxy faster than any starship could travel. A single human exploration vessel had accomplished what the combined might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations had declared impossible. But more than the tactical victory, it was the moral triumph that truly shook the foundations of galactic society. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about strength, courage, and responsibility. The humans hadn't fought for territory, resources, or political advantage. They had risked everything simply because knowledge was worth preserving and because abandoning innocent people to extinction was unthinkable. Within months, the political landscape of the galaxy began to shift. The Alliance of Mutual Defense was formed with the human colonies and the Villani as its founding members, but it quickly grew to include dozens of other species who had been inspired by humanity's example. For the first time in galactic history, a military alliance was based not on mutual interest or shared threats, but on shared principles. The Altherian Empire, once proud conquerors of systems, began converting their war fleets into exploration and aid vessels. The Silicon Confederacy established the first galactic emergency response network, ensuring that no world would ever again face extinction alone. Even the mysterious Ethereal Collective emerged from their isolation to offer assistance to species in need. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural rather than political. Children across the galaxy grew up learning about the day when humanity chose to stand with strangers against impossible odds. The phrase, "we will defend," became a rallying cry for any being who refused to abandon others in their time of greatest. NIDA Captain Elena Rodriguez, recovered from her escape pod and promoted to admiral despite her protests, found herself at the center of a transformation she had never intended to spark. During the ceremony establishing the Alliance of Mutual Defense, she was asked to speak about the moment that had changed everything. "We didn't set out to change the galaxy," she said, addressing representatives from over 100 worlds. "We just saw people who needed help and we had the ability to provide it. That's all any of us can do, really. See the need, have the means, and choose to act." She paused, looking out at the diverse crowd of beings who had been enemies or strangers just months before. The Villani taught us that knowledge is worth preserving. But that day, I think we taught each other that some principles are worth more than survival itself. Elder Cathara, now serving as the Alliance's first Secretary of Cultural Preservation, added her own thoughts to the ceremony. "For 10,000 years my people collected the stories of the galaxy. We preserved the histories of the great and the memories of the forgotten. But we never wrote a story more important than the one that began when a human captain looked at impossible odds and said, 'We will defend.' The crystal towers of Serenity Prime still reach toward the stars, but they no longer stand alone. Around you, them new structures rise, built by dozens of species working together. The archives still preserve the knowledge of the past, but now they also record the ongoing story of a galaxy learning to stand together. And in the depths of space where the pioneer's dream made its final voyage, a memorial beacon broadcasts, a simple message in every known language. Here fell the few who stood for the many. Here began the day the galaxy remembered what it meant to be family. The devourers never returned. Perhaps they learned that some types of knowledge are too dangerous to consume. Perhaps they simply recognized that a galaxy capable of such unity was no longer suitable prey. Or perhaps they understood, as the rest of the universe was learning, that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to leave anyone behind.